whatever your feelings about J.K. Rowling, of course, there is a great deal of spiritual truth contained in the books of Harry Potter. Which is, of course, one of the reasons that they're so popular. And in particular, I thought we might look at the Boggart. The Boggart, of course, is a beast or a magical creature, which no one actually knows what its true form is. But it takes the form of whatever it thinks will scare the person seeing it most. So in this sense, it's an embodiment of fear. And it's a brilliant it's a brilliant part of the story because there's so much truth embedded in this idea, in this fantastical idea, and even to the most sort of subtle levels of its telling. So, for instance, there's a scene where Molly Weasley, the mom of a number of characters in the story, has an encounter with a Boggart. And the Boggart takes on the form of one of her sons, dead on the ground. And then, during the course of that scene, proceeds to take on the form of many of her family members dead. And this is, of course, part of the brilliance of the story and how it mirrors reality. So her fear, in this case, is perfectly justified. Her fear for the lives of her family members is perfectly justified. They're all involved in resisting the enemy of these stories, Lord Voldemort, of course, and they are all in actual danger in their lives. And so the possibility is quite real that they could die. And nevertheless, the way to deal with the Boggart is to see through it, to recognize it for what it is, to see its unreality, if you will. And so there's a moment when protagonist Harry Potter walks in on this scene with Molly Weasley, and she's quite distraught. And for a moment, Harry himself is. He sees what she sees. He sees the dead body of his friend lying on the floor. And he's confused. He's shocked for a moment. And then he realizes that he just saw his friend downstairs. And so it can't possibly be real. And then he realizes it's a Boggart, which is just another way of saying it's just a fear. It's Molly's fear projected into reality given form. And so it's in the recognition. That's the beginning of the sort of undoing of the Boggart. And even though someone else actually finishes off the Boggart in that scene, the person who does, Lupin, he has an even sort of more immediate realization than Harry does, and he's able to see it for what it is and act immediately. We could say from a place of self, a place of confidence and spiritual maturity, if you will. And just as in Harry Potter, so in the world. There's something within us, a force. We give it many names. Self with a capital S, etc., etc., which sees, recognizes the unreality of our fears, even when they seem quite justified. The unreality, of course, is that as justified as a fear might be, we don't actually know what's going to happen in this life. And we can't predict. And of course, when we dwell on our fears, we actually tend to give them more reality, more substance. And in the case of some fears, some patterns, we recreate those same situations in our lives based upon the beliefs we've adopted around those fears. we can see this, of course, often more easily in other people's lives, lives around us, when someone is triggered, goes into some kind of old patterned response. Is acting out some old pattern response, fear-based kind of response to a situation in their lives. And of course we do this ourselves, even though it's usually easier to see when someone else does it. And yet, as our sensitivity increases, we become more conscious when we do it ourselves, when it's happening, when we're acting from and within an old conditioned response or pattern. There's subtle feelings and ideas and sort of worldviews that come when we're looking out from that perspective. And as with just about everything in the spiritual life, what actually begins to change this is consciousness itself, of course, right? It's not so much that we become more mentally aware of being triggered or being in an old conditioned response. Even though we might become more mentally aware, we might start to recognize on that level what transforms and dissolves ultimately these kind of cul-de-sacs, traps, is consciousness itself. That seeing, that recognition. Oh, oh yeah, I know what this is. And it always leads to the same thing. I always have this same response. And it always leads to this same feeling state. There's another scene when, actually I think there's a couple scenes, right, where Lupin takes care of a Boggart, I believe, and So he comes into the room, sees the same situation as Harry, and immediately recognizes what's happening, what's going on. It's a Boggart. It's not real. And for him, the Boggart transforms into the moon, which is significant for Lupin because he's a werewolf. And he waves his wand and says the incantation. And I believe these are the exact words. Almost lazily. Almost lazily. The implication, of course, is that he has seen and experienced this fear, which is particular to him, so terribly often, has experienced it, walked through it, we could say, that it's lost all of its fearfulness for him. It doesn't mean he doesn't have the response. The Boggart still turns into the moon for him. But it just doesn't really matter. He flicks his wand lazily, and it's gone. This is very similar to the experience of awakeness. Which is not that illusion can never arise. Illusion can arise. And it's seen at once. And it dissolves.